Everyone in Queensland will be choosing who they want to represent them in local council on March 16th. Along with councillors in their local electorate, all Brisbane residents will vote directly for who the next Lord Mayor of Brisbane will be. So far, the Brisbane Channel has spoken with the candidates representing the three major parties: Tracy Price for Labor, Jonathan Sriranganathan for the Greens, and the current Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner for the LNP. But what about the other three names on the list? Who are they and what do they stand for? In this video, I interview independent candidate Gilbert Holmes. Well, thanks for joining me. Great to have you on the Brisbane Channel.
Great to be here.
Yep. You just mentioned before we started the interview, you have watched a couple of the interviews, so you kind of know what to expect.
Yeah.
That's important for people to be aware when they're sort of assessing and comparing who's actually had a bit of time to think and who hasn't. So, yeah. All right, so I guess the first thing is, you're running as an independent. You're not sort of affiliated with a party or anything like that. So people won't really have a lot of idea if they haven't encountered you already. They won't really know, So who is Gilbert Holmes? What do you stand for? Where are you coming from?
Well, for me, the key theme I go for is I look to the way that we're thinking and hopefully trying to get people to change the way they're thinking. We've had 500 years of liberal individualism, like a cosmology of the separateness of the individual that's fed through our political and economic theory. And so for me, the deeper truth, which has got an extensive history as well, is that actually the cosmology is polar. We're both separate and we're connected. We're competitive and we're cooperative. We're gentle and we're strong. There's a polarity that runs through existence. Okay. And that ideals, when we're talking about ethics, this ideal governance, ideal economic policy, we're looking for a balance where we're able to support the individual and the community, cooperation and competition. So each of us is trying to commune with one another, resulting in this cooperation. We're also trying to control our surrounds, resulting in ongoing competition. So both is true. You have these parallel rivers of cooperation and competition, and where there's balance, then the two become mutually supportive. We're both cooperative and competitive, and both of them are maximised when they're working together, and both of them are positive, whereas when they're on their own and in the extreme, both is negative.
Okay, all right. So let's jump into the questions that everybody's answering so that we can compare like for like. The first question is, what motivated you to run for Lord Mayor of Brisbane this time?
Well, like I was just alluding to, I've had this vision, this dream of yin-yang polarity, and I've been on that theme for decades now. I've taken that through a pair of degrees at uni with economics and political science, and it's been a dream of mine to campaign for political office for years. So the idea of mayor, the campaigning for mayor is a good fit for me because I have a lot of focus on building local governance capacity, not just at the scale of Brisbane, but down through neighbourhoods and suburbs, building diverse economic capacity and governance. So the local government's a good fit for me in that way, although in the future I intend to campaign for higher office as well. Okay.
What do you see as the most important elements of the role of Lord Mayor?
The mayor is an enabler of policy and the administration of the governance, getting people to work together, being able to maintain a collegial workplace amongst the administrators, I think would be a key, most important role for the mayor, is getting people to work together to build good policy and run effective government.
Okay. And what would you say is your broad vision for Brisbane in the next few years?
The key program that I'm looking at is to build governance and economic capacity through neighbourhoods, suburbs, town centres, so that we can build a more interdependent communities, stronger communities, so people in terms of security and crime, it's a policy that something that continually comes up when you talk to people. They don't feel safe on the street, so we want a stronger community. People have eyes on one another, and build up some critical mass where people are living in safe and supported communities. And with that governance and economic capacity, it's both from a cooperative and competitive perspective, building that economic capacity. So from the more cooperative aspect, we can look at those more local governments in neighbourhoods and suburbs being able to run welfare supporting programs like granny care facilities or disabled services, also running council programs like maintaining roads and parks and other stuff like that, looking after all sorts of service provision at that more local scale.
Right. And so you'll be dealing with a lot of different interest groups with a range of different things that they want from council, often maybe at odds with each other. So how do you navigate that? How do you negotiate all of these competing interests and bring together all of those things into the running of council?
Well, I think that's important, like I said, to have that collegial attitude. And one thing I really don't like to see in the political forum is when you see short-term, opportunistic politicking, where people are making deliberately poor policy simply in the contest for political power. So, and you find clubbish elements join together and say, oh, now we've got the power, so we'll exclude these other people from the decision-making process. It's one thing I'm very much opposed to in political process. And so for me, I think the key element of maintaining a good government is to be able to reach across that spectrum and enable all legitimate, well-intentioned interests to have a say.
Okay. One of the things that people expressed a lot of, well, I guess, dissatisfaction with was public transport. So what's your assessment of the current state of public transport, and what would you plan to do in that area going forward?
Well, I'm a big fan of public transport. I certainly believe that climate change is real. For example, I'd like to see cars off the street. So as I was talking about that, a more local governance and economic capacity, you can move, for example, toward policies like a local job guarantee, and trying to build a pattern of more local patterns to daily life into the socio-political and economic system. To keep cars off the street like that, it's obviously a longer term goal. And in the shorter term as well, I'm supportive of any policies that will enable people to get around without having to get into their private vehicles. We see a society built around the private automobile and the burning of fossil fuels in association with that, where we see a lot of people tend to be isolated. If you either have a car or it's very difficult to find employment, to get around. So building a society in a way that it's able to support people to live together without needing those private automobiles so much, but also in a more high-tech world we can see people getting around. And so you've got the e-scooter, for example, microbuses, light rail, anything that will enable people to get around without requiring the use of the private automobile. I'm supportive of, within reason in terms of budgeting, of course.
So another kind of connected area, and you do talk a lot about getting cars off the road. So in terms of traffic congestion, I mean, short term, how would you see addressing that issue?
Yeah, I think I'd be looking at incentives and penalties, carrot and stick, encouraging people to, making it more attractive for people to find other options rather than to get in their private vehicle to drive to work for the daily commute or to drive their kids to school, etc.
Okay. And I guess you did mention e-scooters. So in terms of active transport, making things easier for people to get around by bike, like bicycles, talking bikeways and things like that, e-scooters, even pedestrian access to various parts of the city. What are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, so I've mentioned already about building capacity within smaller communities so that it makes walking so that we can get what we need through walking and riding on a little scooter or riding our push bike. We could get to work and we can get to social engagements close to home is a key theme in the longer term. And in the shorter term, I'm very much in favour of policies like bridges and pedestrian access.
Okay.
To.
All right, just make sure I don't miss anything here. Okay, so Brisbane is a rapidly growing city. So what are your plans as far as the effects, managing the effects of increased population on the city?
Well, I think actually that Brisbane could do something toward reducing immigration to Brisbane. I think is something that I'd like to see. So if we can, for example, if it's to do with, for example, supporting housing for people, if we could have a situation where different areas within Brisbane, say Chermside or the Tennyson region, if people can be like a registered residents, and then this area of Tennyson or Chermside or another region is then socially responsible for housing of these people, then that provides a disincentive for people from the outside to come and buy up all the houses and exclude people who might otherwise be marginalised and isolated. So there's room for growth, and there's room for building more housing. You'll hear talk from everyone about higher density housing around train stations and things like that, which is an obvious solution. Getting those planning regulations changed to allow for higher development around train stations where there's shops and facilities already in place, and we can expand the population like that without unduly stressing the road network and etc.
And that kind of leads to another concern people had that you kind of touched on there is the whole rental crisis, the situation with housing, affordability and things like that. What do you see as things that Brisbane City Council can do under your leadership to help in that area?
That's something that's a tragic situation going on. We've had generations or decades of the price of housing vastly outstripping the rate of inflation. So housing becoming increasingly out of reach for people, and so we see the poor getting poorer, rich getting richer, relatively richer, and we see a homelessness crisis really gripping the city and the country. And so in the last few days, I've seen a mother with 3 kids seemingly living out of a shopping trolley, another woman of retirement age bathing herself in a public drinking fountain. We see tents in parks all over the place. We hear reports repeatedly of the homelessness crisis, and it really is a crisis, and it needs a radical change in approach to enabling good housing for people. So there's a range of mechanisms that can be employed. I mentioned immigration. You could look at that on the national scale as well. Starting to build more self-reliance for the local communities and for Brisbane without needing to chase our tail, for example, with economic growth. For me, this is a major flaw in the economic system, that it's constantly needing to grow, otherwise it collapses. So for me, if we've got the economy to such a scale that it's supporting the welfare of the people, is ecologically sustainable, etc., then we can call that a 0 point, and we can have a steady state economy that's still got change and still vibrant, but that it doesn't need to chase its tail with ongoing economic growth. So we've been pushing high levels of immigration associated with needing economic growth, otherwise the economy collapses. That's for me a problem with the structure of the economic system, and that's contributing to poor housing outcomes, driving up the price of housing, using up the housing stock that might otherwise be housing local people. So there's that issue. There's the lack of social housing provision. I mentioned earlier we could look at housing provision with a more collective aspect to the economy. So I'm looking at that in a decentralised sense, where neighbourhoods, suburbs, if we can build the governance capacity within those tiers within the society, we can have neighbourhoods and suburbs who are managing local housing stock, providing that social for the social need of the people who live in that area. And also at the Brisbane scale, in terms of moving towards more collective capacity within the economy, I'd like to see Brisbane investing in not just construction business, but diverse businesses. But in this case, we're talking about Brisbane being able to run a construction company that can build housing at cost, and also helping to provide a price benchmark against which private economy will be measured. But being able to build that housing to meet the social need rather than leaving that up to the private market.
All right, so we've committed to the 2032 Olympics. So what's your position on the Olympics and the preparations leading up to that?
Well, I think we can showcase a much better Brisbane than we've got at the moment. We've built a society of increasingly isolated individuals, and based on a broken dream of liberal individualism and the separateness of the individual, and we've got an opportunity to, for me, polarity, a polar method of understanding ideals with cooperation and competition, centralised, decentralised, where balance provides the ideals. We get a foothold on a great work where we can look toward rebuilding not just Brisbane but the world. We can build in dialogue, we can build a language around defining a better ideal, and we can set about in Brisbane building a showpiece for that, toward that better ideal with sustainable, with more participatory democracy, tiered up, more directly democratic governance systems, something that we can build a city, a nation, and a world in that we can be proud of and that can last into the future.
Okay. And then another thing that is uniquely Brisbane is the flooding. So as far as flood mitigation and building flood resilience goes, what are your thoughts in that area?
Well, I think that climate change is real, and we're likely to see waves of ice melt and rising ocean levels in coming decades, and we're going to have to look towards building Brisbane higher and rolling back those houses that are further in the flood zone, building flood mitigation with engineering and drainage and other systems that can help mitigate the effects of short-term high-level impacts, floods that last for a few weeks, but we've really got to look at dealing with the likely increase and severity of floods in the long term by changing the structure of Brisbane in response to the potential impact of those floods.
Okay. All right, this is something I think you might have some thoughts about, and that is how Brisbane City Council can help build more a sense of community in Brisbane.
I certainly have thoughts about that. The ideal of the free individual is a broken dream, which has resulted in many isolated and excluded individuals, where even those individuals who are successful and have managed to make it into the middle class are often found sitting by themselves in cars. And it's a tragically broken system where people do not know their neighbours, let alone are able to interact with their neighbours economically, with a pattern of buying and selling, with the capacity to run common enterprises in the common interest at those smaller scales. And I also mentioned this building strong communities in terms of helping people feel safe when they're on the street. There's a critical mass of community where people feel comfortable that everyone's got eyes on everyone else. If there's people in the community who have got anger issues and are running off track, that we can hope that people understand that we know that there's this person out there, this is the problem here, rather than every individual where their knowledge of their community, their interactive capacity with the community ends at the front gate. There's very little in the way of real community at those smaller, more human scales. To support that, we need governance capacity at those more human scales, and we also need a pattern of people interacting together economically.
So how do you encourage that? How do you make that happen?
I think a key policy for me would be to reserve a portion of the rates for organisations at the more local scale to put their hand up. Brisbane City Council can help enable more local communities to build governance capacity, and then they put their hand up. They are a participatory governance system where the people who live in the region are able to contribute to the decision-making processes. They've got their books in order, etc. We can give these people a portion of the rates to start running council services. Council can assist these organisations to run local businesses at that smaller scale, to enable micro private businesses, locally focused bakeries, egg production, etc., any number of privately focused micro businesses that are currently excluded from operating at that more local level because we're lacking a pattern of interactivity between people. We're lacking the necessary socio-economic capital that enables people to interact not just collectively, but for private business to interact on those smaller scales.
So I guess the next question is around the culture within Brisbane City Council. And so what kind of culture in council is going to create the most effective council and you know, make you able to get things done, and how do you encourage that culture?
I think we need to break down the division between the left and the right, whereby we can, on the one hand, support a conservative ethic, a look after our own conservative ethic, and on the other hand, with a progressive agenda toward building an egalitarian, sustainable, democratic society. We can, and the key theme for me in terms of our bridging that divide is in building strong communities. And it's also about building that language of commonality. And so for me, it relates to the ethic and the language of the middle way of the Buddha, the golden mean of Aristotle. Both our connectedness as a community, where we have rights because we are responsible for looking after one another, and our separateness as individuals, where we have rights that derive to us as individuals. Both is true, and they help one another when we're not just free, as we have heard about for so long in this liberal individualism of the last 500 years, but we're also connected as a community. We're socially cohesive and we're individual. Both become mutually supportive. And so building that common ethic, beginning to push away those people on both sides of politics who are engaged in the kind of short-term politicking and us versus them contest for political power, trying to build a coalition across the political spectrum in service of a common good.
So one concern that people had, you know, with the cost of living increases, and it's just getting so expensive to live these days, is rates. Do you see rates increasing with the vision that you have for Brisbane, or what? What's your position as far as rates go, or your expectations?
I think a key theme for me in relation to rates and the price is related to the price of housing. When I see the price of housing driven down, and so that affects rates. I'm not so much interested in major projects at the large, major expensive projects at the large scale with transport, etc., as I'm interested in seeing a transformation within the society. So I'd like to see money going to more local communities to build for local communities to manage their own lives collectively and individually, to build that capacity within local community. So I'm not interested in raising revenue with higher levels of rates, as I'm interested in distributing rates back to the people to build the projects that they want at those local levels. That's completely talking around the question, but I think that
No, I
covers
think
the
it
thing.
addresses it. Yeah. All right. So, as you would have seen in the other videos, we kind of finish off with some more contentious issues, and just to see where you stand on these things that people can feel quite passionate about. Pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
Well, obviously, but it goes much further than that. I've also had pineapple on baked potatoes, pineapple in tacos, I believe, came out one time. That they were both a winner. Pineapple on the tofu skewers is for me a recent revelation.
Okay, so very much a pro pineapple on everything person, is it?
In context, I have a regular can of pineapple in the pantry.
Okay. Ibis or Curlew?
Look, I like seeing the evolution of the Ibis. I think I'm putting my hand up to suggest that we're going to see more and more of the black-winged Ibis coming out as they've becoming more and more filthy as they've been raiding the rubbish facilities of the city. But then over recent months, I've also been noticing that the white Ibis has been cleaner than I've seen them in recent years. So it may be that the Ibis is developing some kind of shield, some kind of, I don't know, some glossy shield against the rubbish that is constantly rubbing up against their body. So I quite support the Ibis, but I'm a very big fan of the Curlew. I love those howling night calls. I found a couple of curlew sitting under a tree just outside my house here a few months ago. They sat there hour after hour, standing there with their beautiful long legs and just waiting till dark so they can run around and come out with their haunting howling calls. I'm a very big fan of the curlew.
So you're on the fence here. You got to pick one?
Curlew. I'm going for the curlew.
Okay. Vegemite, should it be kept in the fridge or in the pantry?
I'm a back of the bench guy, but that said, I haven't had a jar of Vegemite in the house for a few months now. I will now that you've asked the question. I do like Vegemite. I like those the B vitamin hit that I appreciate, and the salty flavour, delicious.
All right, so finally somebody who takes a position on that question. So like everybody else is, yeah, I keep one in the fridge and one in the pantry. It depends on what you need. So finally a position. Thank you for that. All right, well, that's it for the questions. So thanks so much again for your time.
Thanks very much, Adam.
All the best in your campaign.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for this the work you do with this local media. Great to see.
Great. All right, well, that's it. Thanks.